Welcome to Tsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Tsunami. I'm Satsunami, and living and learning with me today is my very good friend who he has agreed to open his heart for this episode. It is the one and only Adam. Adam, are you ready to talk about some Sonic adventure?
Hello, good to be back. And all I can really say to answer your question, Mr. Satsu, is he's not going to get away with this.
So what you're saying is we are going to try our best to not make mincemeat out of this episode. No.
I'm going to try my best not to shoot Amy in the face.
Oh dear, we're not even a minute in and already the laughs are going off.
You know, it's the end of Sonic month, so why not go out with a bang?
You are indeed correct. Let's go out with a bang and not a dud in the
Amy's
same
face.
Moving on. Yes, today we are indeed going to be talking about, quite frankly, a series that I hold near and dear to my heart. Although, quite frankly, if you have been listening to Sonic Month, you will know that I absolutely adore the Sonic Adventure series. And this indeed was the very first series that I introduced you to, Adam.
Indeed it was. You introduced me to Adventure 1, oh my god, pre-lockdown anyway.
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago now?
Yeah, I was going to say 3. It must be 3.
Maybe? Good God.
Where has the time gone? Oh yeah, the
different age.
as people have been calling it, the global panini. Sorry, that's offensive to S Banks. Anyway, only true fans will know that reference.
I love when you sprinkle in those stuff, just for the true fans.
Like, I mean, there's inside jokes and then there's just utter niche.
There's jokes inside of jokes.
Yeah, just to quickly explain, S Banks, one of our friends and co-streamers at times, yeah, he uses a panini as an avatar. Not because he chose it, but because he didn't choose anything, so I chose for him.
He was born that way.
He was born flat and grilled.
He was pressed that way.
Did you say he was pressed that way?
Yeah, you're panini press, right? Is that a thing? Or am I just making it up?
Oh no, it is. Green Shield actually got me one. Did I ever tell you that?
You are the kind of person who'd have a panini press.
Only because... What, me or him?
Positive and a negative.
What, me or him?
Oh, clearly you.
Okay, I'm moving this conversation back to Sonic. Okay.
Seems wise.
So yeah, I ended up introducing Adam to Sonic Adventure, I think about 3 years ago, and it honestly doesn't feel like 3 years ago, but yep, we're here now. We are through the pandemic, as always. And of course, because of Sonic Month, you went back and played like a lot of these games to get yourself prepared. And one of the games you actually saved, which quite frankly, the best till last, is the Sonic Adventure games. So I gotta ask before we go into this, how did you find it?
It was an interesting experience. So to give some context into my exploration of the Sonic series, one of the first games I sat down to try was Sonic Adventure 1. So I started playing that at the beginning of Sonic Month. I was playing that alongside some of the retro games, finished that up. I'm quite glad that Sonic Adventure was the first Sonic game that I fully got into. I think it's quite a good intro into the series, and I'll expand upon that more as we get into this episode. And then I set it aside. I went and tried out a lot of the other different Sonic games, and I really wanted to save Adventure 2 for the end, because I thought it would make a nice comparison to having played Adventure 1 with kind of very limited experience of having played any Sonic games. It would be interesting to play Adventure 2 after having played quite a few, just to see how my opinions differed from there.
And would you say it was worth it?
Oh, definitely. Like they made a really nice book. They made really nice bookends to the exploration of the Sonic series. It was nice to have that kind of like nice narrative arc's the wrong word, but have that nice kind of arc to my sampling of the Sonic series, to start in the Golden Age and then kind of go back to the Golden Age after having experienced, the Dark Age and the Modern Age and everything like that. So it made a nice kind of circle to the whole experience.
And I have to say, although it has been a long time coming, we have pretty much worked our way through the different ages. We've of course started with the Retro Age, with the 16-bit era. We then moved on to the Dark Age, which of course, well, the less said about that the better, but for a little recap, you've got your Shadow the Hedgehogs, your Sonic 06s, your terrible repeating jazz and Sonic Unleashed. I will still hold that as like a crime against video games, that soundtrack, but we're not here to bash Sonic Unleashed tonight. We had a whole episode to do that.
You had your chance to do that earlier.
Yeah, I had my chance and I failed. And speaking of failed, we also talked about the modern age of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Good link.
Yeah, half joke there. Again, Panda lawyer in the corner saying, for legal reasons, yep, this is indeed a joke, thank you. And yeah, we wrapped up with the final games of the series thus far. That, of course, being Sonic Forces and Sonic Mania, which... yeah, so far we're kind of waiting for Sonic Frontiers as of this episode to come out. But instead of, ending it with a kind of, I don't know about the series, we're going to end it on a high. Okay, we're going to end it on Sonic Adventure, which, quite frankly, has been beloved by pretty much the majority of Sonic fans. I mean, there are a few, hardcore fans, I think, don't really like this game. Have you come across that in your research?
Well, it does seem to me that there is a hardcore group who are very, very dedicated to 2D Sonic. And I don't mean the 2D Sonic who appears in things like Generations and Forces. I mean the Genesis games and that kind of style of Sonic games. And they never seem to have embraced the 3D Sonic games, even ones like the Adventure series, which are, are much better regarded than some of the later ones. But yeah, I don't know if that's a big group. You can probably tell me more about this. If that's a big group within the Sonic fan base, or that's still a kind of relatively small niche.
Honestly, I think it's hard to tell because although Sonic fans are pretty much a large group of very passionate fans, there are a lot of very vocal fans. So it's kind of hard to tell if that's the vocal majority or, just the vocal minority, because being a Sonic fan myself, I know how passionate people can get about Sonic. For example, Sonic's arms turning blue in Sonic Boom. Oh, Sonic shoes are different. Oh, the gameplay is different. Oh, I don't care what anyone thinks. Sonic 06 is my favourite game kind of attitude. It's hard to kind of pin down. Everybody's got so many different opinions. And it's almost a bit like any other franchise, to be honest. Because we were talking about, for example, Batman. I can't believe I'm making this comparison, but you and I were talking about Batman earlier. And it's kind of like that, depending on who your first Batman is, or even James Bond, or I mean maybe James Bond or Doctor Who, that kind of thing, is more apt because Sonic, you're coming into a whole different kind of set of tones, different set of characters. The 2D fans will obviously be a lot older and remember the old days of the 16-bit era, and they might prefer that compared to the grim dark of the Dark Ages. And some people might prefer the modern age because it might be a younger audience that grew up, because I was going to say younger audience, they must be, because Sonic Colors came out in 2010, would you believe? So 12 years ago.
And you called that game modern?
Yeah. Modern, quote unquote. But say without any further ado, will we jump into quite possibly one of the most well-regarded games of the franchise?
Let's go for it. It's been a long month and we're nearing the end, so let's spin dash into this one more time. Or it's just a double boost. Sorry, let's double boost into it.
Well, Adam, while we listen to these ads that are just about to play, follow me, set me free, trust me, and me and you will escape from this ad break. Let's do it. Welcome to Chatsunami, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller, Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
Good lord, there was a lot more trucks than I remember. And that ad break. Yeah, Sonic Adventure. where do we begin? Well, we might as well begin at the beginning, which I know, very cliche. Before we go on, let me just put my cards on the table here. I am a Sonic Adventure fanboy, okay? I'm sorry you had to hear it here first, Adam.
I always suspected deep down. I had a feeling when you said things like, I love the Adventure series, and the Adventure series is my favourite Sonic games, I suspected.
I thought I had it so well, though. I could have sworn I had it so well.
Well, as we know from the previous episode, you're a fan of 3D chess, so you're you're good at plotting and scheming.
Ah, yes, that old 3D chess. I absolutely love this game. As I said in our Retro Age episode, my brother used to have a Sega Mega Drive, and he would play the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and later on I would get a sample of Sonic CD. And while I loved kind of playing those games, it never really enamored me. You know, there were so many other games coming out at the time when I was growing up, and I was kind of getting, you know, like the tail end of the hype. And I've said this like story a million times, but it wasn't until I actually started watching my brother play Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast that I really fell in love with the game. I thought, wow, this looks so cool, you know, it's Sonic fighting this big water monster and everything. And eventually I ended up buying the games like years later for the GameCube, and yeah, I've fallen in love with it ever since. But before we get into that, I'm giving you a job, Adam.
Oh,
You want to summarise Sonic Adventure in this paragraph or less?
Oh my god. Right, so the story of Sonic Adventure encompasses 6 different stories. So you have Sonic, you have Tails, you've got Knuckles, you've got Amy, you've got Big the Cat, and then you've got, I'm going to mess up his full title here, but you've got E102 Gamma?
Yep, that's right.
Oh my god, I can't believe I got that right. So, who's an Eggman robot, basically. So each character has their own separate story, although they often do overlap. And basically, kind of hanging above all these separate stories is this new character called Chaos, who, as you described, looks very much like a water monster. And basically, it turns out that Eggman has released Chaos from his centuries-old prison, and Eggman is seeking to find the 7 Chaos Emeralds and give them to Chaos. Each time Chaos gets a Chaos Emerald, he gets more powerful and grows in size. And Eggman is planning to use Chaos to destroy the city of Station Square, which is predominantly where the game takes place. And Eggman, I believe, is hoping to build his own city on top of Station Square. Am I right in saying?
Yeah,
Eggman
Eggman
Land or
Land.
something, is it?
Yeah, they never really define what Eggman Land is.
I'm imagining his theme park from Shadow the Hedgehog. Or Colours as well has it, doesn't it? So, yeah.
Yeah, and Unleashed as well. We finally built Eggman Land, and it is like a carnival. You're right, yeah.
He's got one vision. It's a carnival or I'm out.
I demanded robot clowns, damn it.
I really want the Sonic game where Eggman has to go to the city square planning committee and be like, I want to build Eggman Land, and they're like, no, there's so many violations here. We can't. You need so much permission, and then this is how he turns into a supervillain. But anyway, so I'm getting very off track now. This has nothing to do with Adventure 1. This is just my Sonic fan game that I'm now describing. So yeah, so basically Sonic is out to stop Eggman. He's basically Sonic and Tails are out to recover the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman can get them. Knuckles gets dragged into the story because as Chaos is released, it shatters the Master Emerald, which is this thing that Knuckles is sworn to protect. So he sets out to recover the pieces of the Master Emerald and return them to Angel Island. Amy gets swept up in the story because she's basically very obsessed with Sonic and is trying to find a way to get Sonic's attention. And as she's doing that, she then basically runs into this small Flicky, which is a small bird, and it's being chased down by some Eggman robots. And so she decides to help the Flicky and protect it. Big the Cat is out to do some fishing with his best friend Froggy, but his best friend Froggy swallows the Chaos Emerald and escapes, so Big has to track him down. And then Gamma starts off as an Eggman robot, but begins to see the kind of evils and the horrors behind Eggman and sets out basically to free his robot brethren from Eggman's clutches. So we've got these separate stories all happening, but I said they intersect and characters run into each other. Some of them experience the same events as others, and so they do all kind of tie in, and then they all kind of tie in around this theme of chaos, and as we learn more about his backstory. But that's basically, if I've hopefully summarized it correctly, that's basically the general story of Adventure 1.
Yeah, couldn't have summed it up better myself. That's why I got you to do it.
I'm sure you could have, but I appreciate the compliment.
Sonic punches water, saves the day.
Oh, that's what I should have said. I was going to say either that or what I ended up saying with
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one because before this, the games mainly focused, other than the spin offs, like let's pretend Knuckles Chaotix didn't exist for a second. But for the most part, Sonic was very, it was all about Sonic, if that makes sense. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say considering this game is called Sonic Adventure. It's about Sonic's adventure, and you play as Sonic, and he's got the longest campaign in this and everything. But it's quite interesting that they take away the focus from Sonic, because kind of the closest you got to that was like with Sonic 2, Sonic 3, where you got to play as Tails and Knuckles. But you were still kind of playing through the same levels. It wasn't really as story driven, if that makes sense. Like, there was a story and it had to be told through, the pixel art, but for Sonic Adventure, they definitely took a different approach. And I think the reason for this is because it was originally supposed to be an RPG. I think for the Saturn, could be wrong in this, I think because the Saturn bombed so much, then they decided, yeah, let's flip this to the Dreamcast. And of course, that's what ended up happening. They ended up developing Sonic Adventure, which is just this massive, grand scale adventure. Well, I say grand scale because I'm going to be honest, the hub world when I was younger was a lot bigger compared to going back nowadays and looking at it, because it's tiny.
It's just because you were so small back then.
Oh, exactly. Like, I remember getting lost so much seeing that forest.
Oh, yeah.
I hated that forest, but kind of now that I know where to go and everything, I'm like, okay, this is the way you go here, there. I still get kind of lost, but I know the main bits. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Oh, I hated that forest. Anyway, but yeah, it's definitely a different take on Sonic, because I'm quite curious to hear what you have to say about this. How did you find it having the different perspectives for the story?
It's interesting. It's an interesting concept. And the idea of having kind of interlocking stories is not a new thing. That's been, it's been done before in other mediums. But it was certainly interesting for a Sonic game, as you say, when previous mainline games had been so focused kind of solely on Sonic and what he was doing. So it was interesting to get a kind of broader view. And it was nice to kind of get a bit more, to flesh out some more of the characters and stuff, to see a bit more of Knuckles and, why the Master Emerald is so important to him, and, to build up, to develop characters a bit more like Amy, and even to kind of go into kind of Eggman's army and stuff with get Gamma's perspective. So it was really interesting. It's a really interesting concept. It felt like Adventure 1 was really designed to kind of show off the power of the Dreamcast in that way, as you say, by having this kind of open world and by having much more of a focus on story, and including obviously voice acting and things that they couldn't do before. Because we are now into the cinematic age of gaming by 1999. And we've had titles like, Ocarina of Time's been out. We've had Half-Life, kind of games like that were much more focused on providing this kind of cinematic experience. Metal Gear Solid as well, things like that. So it really felt like Sonic Adventure was a part of this kind of new trend, and I think it succeeds in a lot of ways in doing that, in giving a much more kind of grander scale to a Sonic game than the Genesis ones had managed to do.
I'm actually laughing because I'm thinking back to, the trivia episode where I asked you why Shadow the Hedgehog has a gun.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the reason Gamma had a gun was for very similar reasons.
People have been trying to get Sonic a gun since 1999.
Yeah, I don't get what this obsession was with Sonic fans trying to get Sonic a gun. It's like, oh
It
god.
would solve the Eggman problem. I mean, I'm just saying, not to like support vigilante justice, but
Well, you can't make an omelette without capping a few Eggmans, apparently.
nice. I like that. But get on a t-shirt.
Yep. Trademarked Satsu and Adam. Yep. It seems like an eclectic mix of characters. Are you ready for this, Adam?
Oh,
A
ready.
smorgasbord of characters.
Love it.
It just seems like an odd bunch, but I will say this, it does definitely add into the adventure aspect of it, because you go from an urban environment like Station Square, and then you end up running all the way to the Mystic Ruins, which I have to admit, one of the things I love about the Mystic Ruins is the fact that the development team actually went to South America to research this, because obviously that was at a time where the internet wasn't as it is today, so they didn't have really any reliable sources, so they decided, hey, let's fly to South America. And they went to the ruins there and they took photos. Apparently some of their photos made it into the game, like his textures. Just the attention to detail for a lot of things. Because I have to admit, that is what I love about this game. The fact that it does feel like a grand scale adventure. You start off in, as I said, in the mean streets of Station Square. I'm thinking back to it, I think this is the first time, obviously other than the robots, that we've seen a gun in a Sonic game. Because at the very beginning, the police try to Robocop Chaos and they start shooting him, and then they realise, oh yeah, he's made of water. Maybe we shouldn't start shooting. Where'd you go from there? So of course, they think, I know, just leave it to the Blue Hedgehog. It's kind of messed up, actually.
I just like how the police never bothered to shot for the rest of the game.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like, oh, well, we tried.
It's not even like gun was a thing at this point.
Good point.
It is, it's just the police who are like, oh no, our weapons are useless. Retreat. All personnel, fall back. And that's it. It's like, okay, now what? It's like, police guys? Yeah, of course, that kickstarts the whole adventure where Sonic is trying to get the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman. I'm going to be honest, I really like the idea of chaos. I love the fact that there is that kind of sense of urgency that is you're kind of developing, with your skills in the game. So too is Dr. Eggman with his arsenal, whether it be, of course, his weaponry, the bloody Egg Viper. We don't talk about the Egg Viper. Still get PTSD after that boss. You've got Chaos who keeps continually evolving with all I'm saying is Chaos 0 up till 4 are cool designs and Perfect Chaos is good. But man, what was up with Chaos 6?
It does go a bit wild. Is that the one where it's like a kind of big beetle in a way?
Yeah, it's like a big beetle cat thing.
Yeah, that was a bit strange.
Like something out of Adventure Time, yeah.
He is quite a cool design. Even if it is like quite blocky, but that would, that's graphics at the time. You can't really hold that against, the game for using the technology that was available. It's like, damn Sega not going into the future and bringing back our 4K graphics now. But he looks it does look quite cool. And I agree with you. I like the idea that I think it's cool that he does like morph and change, and you kind of get a reason for that. It's like, oh, he's absorbing the power of the Chaos Emerald. So that's quite cool. And it does provide, as you say, some good motivation for you trying to like progress and prevent Chaos from getting any more powerful.
And I've got to ask, see, by the end of this game, what were your thoughts?
So by the end of the game, I'd had my frustrations. I'm not going to lie. I'd had my trials and tribulations with the different characters and with some of the levels and some of the events. Trials and tribulations is the perfect description for my experiences fighting perfect chaos. But by the end, I was genuinely surprised how much I enjoyed this game. I was a bit nervous going in. I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, it is like a 1999 game. Have I just missed the boat on this? Is it too late for me to get into it? How am I going to find it? But I'm actually surprised how much I enjoyed it. And I think it was a really good introduction to the Sonic series because, obviously I'm not an expert now at playing Sonic games now, but right at the start, I was basically a baby trying to figure out, how to spin dash and what the hell I was doing with controlling these characters. But the game felt mostly quite forgiving, and it's got a good checkpoint system, which really helps. So you don't end up losing too much progress, thankfully. It's not as harsh as the old Genesis games. So you feel like you can, even if you stumble it a bit, you can kind of come back to it and keep hammering away until you get through. So yeah, there's problems with the game, and I had problems with it, but as I said, I was actually surprised how much I enjoyed playing it.
I was going to ask, would you say it holds up as a game?
Oh, I think yes, because I think generally playing it, I think is still pretty good, and it's still playable. It's not like some other games where it's really frustrating and really fiddly, and you kind of feel like the knowledge of how to play this has kind of been lost. Like I feel bad always bringing up GoldenEye, but I kind of feel GoldenEye is one of these games that is so much of its time, and now going back to it, having played modern FPS games, it's quite difficult and quite a challenge. I think it's easier if you play modern platformers to go back to Sonic Adventure 1. Like, it's not perfect, and you probably will find frustrations with it, but I think it's still perfectly playable. And I certainly, somebody who's not really a fan of platformers, I was able to play around with it and have a good time with it. I think where it falls down, I think is in a lot of the ways of it trying to be a cinematic, trying to fit into that cinematic experience. And I think a lot of those faults are, you can see Sega and Sonic Team trying to figure out how they're going to, transition Sonic into this kind of 3D cinematic era. There's good bits to the story, and I really like things like, I think Gamma has a great story. I enjoyed Knuckles' story, and I enjoyed parts of Sonic's story and everything. I just think the story is told really badly. It's interesting having the interlocking characters, but it muddles the story up so much. And to be honest, it wasn't until the end. And maybe this is the intended thing. Like, I understand that, sometimes you don't understand the story fully until you've played all the characters, until, you've seen all the characters' viewpoints and you reach the end. But I didn't really get that satisfying experience with Sonic Adventure. Amongst all the kind of different character stories, you have the kind of backstory to Chaos and this kind of ancient civilization of Echidnas and the Chow and this, like, cataclysmic event that happened in the past. And you get a lot of flashbacks to the different characters, but it just feels so bizarre the way the flashbacks happen, and the fact the characters don't seem to like have that much reaction to like getting transported back to the past, and it just they seem so inconsequential at points, and it just does, it's such a muddle that I think it really harms the story overall. So I think honestly that's where it hasn't held up, because now we've had so much more experience of how to of how to tell kind of cinematic stories through gaming. I think a lot of these faults are much more prominent now, and you kind of like, oh, it's just not aged well. But I do think gameplay wise, I think the game is still playable. I mean, we can argue about the open world. I don't quite know where I fall on the open world, because I like some parts of it, but I don't like other parts of it. But yeah, I think gameplay wise, I think it still holds up pretty well.
This iteration of Sonic is, and this is nostalgia talking, but I really do like this version of Sonic. That, of course, being Ryan Drummond, who voiced Sonic from, I want to say, Sonic Adventure to Sonic Heroes. I think that was like the range before they got in Jason Griffith. But I really liked him, and I liked a lot of the voice cast in this game, especially Eggman. Oh, sorry. See, before we go on, can we talk about Eggman? That, of course, being Dean Bristow, who I'm pretty sure he did the voice for Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. I'm 99% sure on that. But my God, what a voice actor. It's a shame that he's unfortunately passed away, so the mantle of the voice actor for Eggman was passed on. I think it was to Mike Pollock next, who, no offence to Mike Pollock, does a fantastic job of being Dr. Eggman and the kind of big booming voice, but see, when it comes to like being intimidating, my God, Dean was by far head above shoulders. I don't know if I can think of like any other iteration of Eggman where I've genuinely thought, oh no, oh no, this guy is serious. Like, for example, at the end of Tails' story, he literally just fires a missile into the middle of Station Square. You think, oh my God. And he's like, oh no, it was a dud. So you have to run after and get to the missile before him. And then he jumps in his giant mech. And then, the very iconic line of, away before I make mincemeat out of you. And I am not selling that very well, but trust me, just the sinisterness just dripping from his performance. I will say this, I feel as if he is the only one out of the voice cast that kind of has like a consistency to him, because I've heard rumours and everything, so I can't 100% say, oh, the reason they weren't good was because of this or that, because apparently Knuckles actually had a different voice actor for E3, and then for some reason they changed him for the main game. Now, there's loads of reasons. Like, some people say, oh, it's because they didn't tell them, how they should be acting, or there was other moments where it was like, oh, they were being directed by people who didn't speak English very well. So I don't know the specific reason for why the deliveries come out the way they do, but some of them come out quite awkward. Like, for example, Adam, do you remember the very beginning where Tails is about to crash his plane and Sonic literally goes, look out, you're gonna crash. Ah!
I do remember that. There are a couple of those kind of ones, aren't there?
I mean, it's a bad day when the robot's even more consistent than Sonic. I have to say though, see, story-wise, I would definitely say Sonic's is definitely the strongest one. And this is something I brought up to you before we started recording this, but I'm wondering how well this game would have held up if it was just a Sonic-centric story.
That's an interesting that's a good question. Sonic's gameplay certainly, I think, is some of the best. It wasn't my favorite. Knuckles was my favorite gameplay wise.
I was surprised, I have to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just because I found Knuckles so easy to control. Well, so easy to control, but much more easy to control than I'd found Sonic and Tails before. And in fact, I really enjoyed the first half of Sonic's story, but I found myself getting frustrated later on in the kind of latter half. Part of that's maybe the game design, but I think a lot of that is the fact that this was my first Sonic game and I was still kind of, learning the ropes of how Sonic controlled and everything and how these games worked. So I don't think I can fully put that on the game's design. It's an interesting question because, as you say, it's an interesting point you say with it being titled Adventure, because that does imply, a much grander scale of events with a larger cast of characters. So maybe to just have had Sonic might have felt a bit underwhelming. It might not have felt like a proper adventure in many ways. That's a good question. I don't know quite know what to say to that one, but it's a really good question.
Because I have to say, Sonic's not perfect in this game, but I would say he controls probably the way I think a lot of people thought he would control from 2D to 3D. Because let's face it, there's a lot of games that really, really struggle to adapt 2D characters into the 3D sphere. Because, I mean, you and I have had conversations about the transition for Mario going into, from 2D to Super Mario 64, which is your favourite game, of course.
I'm sure we'll bring this up again, but I have some things to say.
Yep, in the future. Actually, no, sorry, before we go on, would you say, and this is where we're going to get controversial, this is Chat Tsunami Hot Takes here, would you say the transition from Sonic's 2D to 3D was done better than Mario's transition from 2D to 3D?
Right, here we go. Since you're leading me down this garden path, I'll skip down it here. Right. I think, comparing Super Mario 64 to Sonic Adventure, I think Super Mario 64 is a more important game. And I think it deserves its place in gaming history. Because this was the first attempt to make a 3D platformer, and Nintendo deserve all the props for what they did, and it laid the groundwork and everything like that. That being said, I had far more fun with Sonic Adventure than I did with Super Mario 64. Again, this is a personal opinion. This doesn't represent Chat Tsunami as a whole, and other opinions are available. I accept that. I personally think Sonic did the 3D transition better in his first game than Mario did. I found Mario 64 quite a frustrating game to play. I respect it. I didn't like it. Sonic Adventure, it has its faults, it has its flaws, but I had much more fun playing it. So that's what I'll say about it.
And yeah, is this your last episode?
Please direct all hate to Satsunami. He is my agent.
I don't agree to that.
Can I borrow your red panda lore, please? I feel like I'm going to need them.
Yeah, just over here. Yeah, I'll give you the details later. Okay, he's on his way. Sonic Adventure, I have to say, is definitely one of those games that it's hard to say if it was as impactful. I would say Super Mario 64 is probably, you're right, it's more impactful on the kind of 3D platformer sphere, and you have no idea how much that hurt to say. But I do think that Sonic Adventure can't be understated, and I know it has its flaws, it has Big the Cat, but for the time, considering it has all these different gameplay styles, and I mean, don't get me wrong, not all of them hit. Like, as I was saying to you, I have played through this game so many times, and, I always play through Sonics, I play through Tails, I play through Knuckles, I play through Gamma stages, and then after that, you've got Amy and you've got Big the Cat, and you're like, do I want to play? Because I have less memories about going through those. I mean, I remember I used to be afraid of Zero, who's the robot that chases Amy. I remember that. I remember being terrified of that when I was younger.
I can get that. In fact, I can see as a kid think that would be the kind of scary thing.
Yeah, like when I got older, I realised you can just hit him and run away, and there's like no tension whatsoever. You're like, oh, okay. But back then, yeah, it was like absolutely terrifying. This huge hulking monster, and I didn't want to play that level. I was like, oh, it's too scary. I was a wimp. Sue me. No, actually, for legal reasons, that's a joke. Don't sue me. But I have to admit, some of my favourite moments of this game come from the side characters. I absolutely love the characterization of these people. I love Tails' growth as an individual. He goes from a sidekick to Sonic to saving Station Square. We've got Knuckles learning to kind of stand on his own 2 feet. Even with Amy, I have to admit, even with Amy, although I'm not a big fan of her character, I did like the fact that she, became a little bit more independent throughout the story. She realised she didn't need to depend on Sonic either, which is kind of ironic because it's all these stories about people not depending on Sonic, and then in the last story, they all depend on Sonic to save them. Kind of shot themselves in the foot with that one, I have to say. Big, he's big, he fishes. There's really not much to say other than he's become like a running joke on the channel. And then there's Gamma. And before we move on to Adventure 2 and of course the last story, can we just talk about Gamma for a second?
Yeah, like I think from story perspective, Gamma was my favourite, definitely.
Oh, by far, head and shoulders above. Because while Tails is and try saying that 3 times, while Tails is quite, emotional, it's quite, oh, he's, standing up, he's becoming his own hero. Sonic is the cool dude with the attitude. You've got all these kind of self-growth stories. Gamma's is a tragic one. And I remember watching like a couple of people play through Sonic Adventure, and it actually got me quite annoyed because, again, I'm not going to name any names, but there were particular Let's Plays where they played through Gamma's story and they were like laughing at the very end. And obviously, you can interpret it the way you want. I'm not going to gather the torches and pitchforks and things and be like, down with the heads. But I honestly thought it was quite poignant. I mean, again, Sonic game, but I thought it was quite sad because it's the only story in the game where, a character practically dies and doesn't come back. Gamma's whole purpose in the game is, well, in fact, rewinding. At the beginning, you see him, with his brothers, quote unquote, his fellow robots, and then he sees his fellow robots like snatched away right before his eyes. And then he ends up going into the wrong room, and you see this absolutely horrific image. Well, it would be for a robot of his brother getting ripped apart and rebuilt into this like Frankenstein monster thing. And I have to admit, I do love his reaction. He's deadpan when he comes out and he goes, "This was the wrong door." It's like, oh no. I think it's so sad because his whole purpose after realizing there's more than being an Eggman robot is he decides to save his friends by, blowing them up. I know there's an irony there, but, you realise that he's blowing them up so the flickies inside can get out. And then at the very end, he just decides to, get shot fatally. He falls, and there's this just like slow zoom out as this flicky flies away. And I remember the first time as a kid getting quite emotional over this, being like, wow, I didn't expect this from a Sonic game. What were your thoughts on it, Adam?
I think it's really good. I think for a start, it was a really interesting idea to have this perspective from within inside, the Eggman Empire, so to speak, and to get this and to actually see, because it's one thing to view Eggman through the eyes of characters like Sonic and Tails and everything, but to actually see it from, a character who's working for Eggman and then their kind of, their journey in their kind of redemptive arc, I think was really great. I think it was done really well, and I think it is a really kind of affecting ending. I know I kind of criticized the overall story earlier on, but I think the individual stories really help to kind of to elevate this game, because I think gameplay wise I found Gamma quite clunky to play. I kind of enjoyed it to begin with, but I found him quite clunky to play as later on, a bit awkward. And I kind of found the same thing with Tails. I wasn't really a fan of Tails' gameplay because I felt like I was just having to repeat the exact same stages as I'd just done with Sonic and everything. But I kind of feel that their character arcs are really good, and that kind of makes up for the the kind of I'd say, well, to me anyway, more kind of lackluster gameplay. But having these kind of really strong arcs and seeing these growth in these characters, even Amy, Amy was probably my least favorite story. I just really didn't like her gameplay, but she has some nice growth towards the end, so it kind of makes it seem worth it, and you kind of can forgive. Well, I can certainly forgive the kind of gameplay faults I was finding, because I think these character arcs are quite strong.
And of course, flash forwarding to the end, because let's face it, there's so many good things about this game. Also bad, I will admit, like the sky chase, the sky deck, anything with the word sky in it pretty much is a death sentence for my enjoyability for these levels. But I don't know, I really liked a lot of this game. I loved the way Sonic controlled. Sometimes it's a little bit janky. I loved the fact in, levels like, is it Casinopolis?
Yeah, because Casinopolis, isn't it?
Yeah, the casino level where, you can decide to either play the pinball, or if you don't get enough rings, you can go down and do like a more kind of traditional route underneath in the sewers, and you can do more platforming there. The game does reward you for exploring, because after I was watching a video on the Sonic Adventure series, and I didn't realise, like, there's some moments where if you get up to, like, certain buildings and certain rooftops, you can actually get, like, extra lives and things like that. There were all these, like, kind of tiny details that the programmers really didn't have to add. You know, they didn't have to say, oh, we're going to add this bit, we're going to add that bit just for, you know, poops and giggles. We're going to... But at the end of the day, they did. And it just shows, like, the love and attention to this game. As I said, you've got Station Square, which is, I was going to say bustling metropolis, but it's like 3 zones in a sewer. Okay, maybe a couple more. There's a pool. I like the fact that the NPCs have their own stories. I don't know if you kind of picked up on this or talked to many of the NPCs, did you?
I didn't when I was playing through the game, but you know, looking at things afterwards, it was cool to see that they did have these kind of separate stories, and you could actually track different characters as the game progressed.
Because I mean, you've got the mother who has a gambling problem, which I thought, Jesus, that's dark. You've got the guy who's having an affair, apparently. You know, you've got all these like kind of stories going on in the background, and I have to say that's kind of a nice touch. I want to say, you know, it was something that's completely not necessary, and like, and I know technically it's for gameplay reasons, like for example the train strikes and everything, where you go up and it's like, oh sorry, you can't go to the Mystic Ruins, which means your level is in that particular area, which again I do like that. There's some janky bits in the story, again having to repeat certain levels, like having to fight Chaos 4 3 times, having to fight Chaos 6 3 times, one of which is with a fishing rod. I do not like that, Sega. I really did not like that. How dare you? But at the end of the day, it's this kind of package that comes together. And don't get me wrong, before any Sonic fan points it out, I know that I've primarily played the DX version, which is like the considered to be the jankier version. But even with the jankier version, I still loved this game. I absolutely adored it, even though there was a couple of moments where I thought, oh great, we have to do this again, we have to do that. I loved it. Before we move on to Sonic Adventure 2, because I know that's what the fans want, I've got to ask, what did you think of the finale?
So I experienced, I think it's fair to say, a range of emotions in the finale. I think the form of Perfect Chaos is really cool, and it's imposing and it's intimidating. And the fact that Station Square just gets wiped out is is pretty dramatic. I was like, oh damn, I didn't quite expect that. So that was quite a cool like shock. And I said, Perfect Chaos looks pretty cool. I suppose it's nice that all the characters kind of gather together to give their emeralds to Sonic. It didn't quite. I don't think it quite all made sense why it happened, but you know, hey, you know, power of friendship and everything. And it was cool to play. This was my first experience of playing as Super Sonic, so that was quite cool. I thought the fact that the boss fight was kind of based around Sonic's speed and getting to Perfect Chaos was really cool. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool concept, and I really liked it. However, at first I didn't quite understand the mechanics of what was going on. So when you're in Super Sonic form, you have a ring count, but it's basically constantly ticking down. And if you reach 0 rings, then Sonic reverts back to his normal form, and you'll basically die. You'll lose a life. So you need to kind of keep collecting rings and also move fast enough to prevent that from happening. I didn't realize that was happening at first. So and a couple of times I was like, what happened? What's going on here all of a sudden? That was frustrating. I also found it frustrating because I felt I was getting caught on bits of the scenery which would just instantly kill my momentum, and basically then meant I was likely to get like smashed by one of Chaos's projectiles and then, you know, lose my rings and everything. So I was like, I found it very frustrating, I'm going to be honest, in the middle section, because I just felt I was running into these kind of mechanical issues. I didn't understand the gameplay and everything. But once I figured out that, you know, the rings were counting down and I had to get them before it reached 0, I focused, got myself in the zone, and I got a really good sense of satisfaction from taking down Perfect Chaos. So yeah, a range of emotions. I think because I left with a good emotion. I'll say it's overall good. I just wish I'd kind of understood quicker what was happening and, you know, what I needed to do.
So what you're saying is all well that ends well, right?
Yeah, let's go with that.
I feel as if that line, and I'll get to the one in Sonic Adventure 2, but that line from Tails where the city's been like submerged in water, countless people probably dead by this huge chaos god, and he goes, all's well that ends well, right? And it's like, God damn it, Tails. God damn
It's a city half full of water, not half empty of water.
Well, he is an optimist, what can I say? He saved it from getting blown up only for it to be drowned, so,
You
small
can only
wins.
control what you can control.
So, two things before we move on, but two things I really appreciated in this particular moment was, you've got like the huge build up to Supersonic. He's holding the emeralds and everything, and it's happening, and he turns into Supersonic. But one of the narrative decisions I really liked in this level was the fact that, obviously the gameplay was just like bashing into a big monster, but narratively that's not what was going on. Like Sonic himself says, he doesn't say like, oh, let's trap this beast, let's throw rocks at his brain until it collapses. He was saying like, even if we beat this thing and put it back into the emerald, it's still gonna be angry. And I get it's cheesy and everything, but I think that's quite a nice lesson for kids as well. It's not all about saying, oh, I'm the good guy and this is the bad guy. It's like him trying to justify and say, this is like a creature that's been taken advantage of, used, abused, and just absolutely wreaks havoc because of all these injustices. And you see that in the flashback scenes. Admittedly, flashbacks might not hold up as well. But you get to see at the end, Chaos like descends down and then he does a poochie and says he must go because his chow needs him. And yeah, that's then the end of the game. And I have to admit, what I love as well is the fact that Eggman is not a pushover in this game. It's the fact that he pulls is it an egg carrier 2 out his backside, where he's just like, the egg carrier 2 was designed for this kind of thing. You have defied your master, stupid beast. And he starts like going, pew pew.
Did this game also set the trend for Eggman unleashing a powerful evil only for the powerful evil to turn on Eggman and ultimately in the end?
I think you're right, yes.
I seem to notice that a couple times in some of the games. I was like, he's not quite learnt, has he?
Well, it happens in Sonic Lost World, of course. Can't believe I'm bringing that game up again. Sonic Unleashed.
06.
06, yeah. Technically heroes. Like, technically, but not technically. Yeah, no, you're right.
2.
Adventure 2, of course. But speaking of that, before we move on to Adventure 2, are there any kind of closing points you want to bring up about this game?
I just think I would say, in summation, that I really admire what Sonic Team and Sega were trying to do with this game, and I think it was a really admirable attempt to bring Sonic into 3D, and I think they succeeded in a lot of ways. I don't think they quite got there. I think there are faults with this game, but I really admire the intentions and the fact that they were trying to just expand this, and they thought, let's include multiple characters, and let's have a much more kind of epic story, and let's have a kind of open world players can explore around, and let's try for some different gameplay styles. So there's so much to admire in this game that I think that kind of overrides a lot of the faults of the game, because you're like, well, they really were trying here. They really were. They obviously, this was something to really show. This was a game to show off like the power of the Dreamcast, and I think it really succeeded in a lot of ways. So you can criticize this game. I don't think it's perfect by any stretch, but I think there's just so much to admire in it that I think that's partly why I enjoyed it as well, because just I could see the kind of I could see the effort that went into this and the kind of hopes they had for it.
And I have to say, this of course was one of the most prolific games for the Dreamcast, and unfortunately Sonic Adventure 2 would be its last entry into the last Sonic entry into the Dreamcast library. And my god, what a swan song to actually go off on, because where Sonic Adventure kind of set the stage for a 3D Sonic, and quite admirably, might I say, we ended up getting Sonic Adventure 2, which... Do you want me to summarise this? Because I feel bad getting you to summarise Adventure.
I mean, I'm more than happy to try and do it again, but if you really want to go for it and you want to do an actual proper job, please take off. But I can always try. I'm always
No, I'll take this one then, because I feel bad. I made you do this.
My summation of Adventure 1 was so bad, I don't blame you.
No, you had 6 characters to cover, to be fair. So, yeah, long story short, you might be wondering, is Sonic Adventure 2 a continuation? Yes and no, because there's a lot of references to Adventure 1, but really it's not a direct... I wouldn't say it's like directly following on from Adventure. It is and it isn't. Essentially, the story follows the miscommunication of the century, where they think that this evil hedgehog is Sonic the Hedgehog, and apparently there's only 3 hedgehogs in the world, Sonic, Shadow and Amy at this point. And they go, okay, it can't be Amy, it must be Sonic. And of course the president, who is anti-hedgehog up until Shadow the Hedgehog, where he's pro-hedgehog, that's another story for another day. Essentially they try to frame Sonic for these like horrible crimes, and throughout this he unveils a conspiracy where he finds out that this new mysterious figure, Shadow the Hedgehog, is trying to activate this space station, which conveniently has the face of Dr. Robotnik. But spoilers, it turns out it isn't Dr. Robotnik's, it's his grandpa, which makes me think, what happened to Eggman's dad?
Is he the failure of the family? It's like, we don't talk about him. He was a music teacher or something instead.
A carpenter.
He was a simple man.
I just want to make toys for the children, I swear. Oh, yeah, I don't know how that works, and I don't know who Eggman's grandmother or mother is, you know. Some things in the Sonic lore are best left alone. That's all I'm saying. Best left alone. But of course, that leads to a rather interesting confrontation between Eggman trying to, you know, establish Eggman Land and fighting against our heroes who are racing against the clock before Eggman fires his, I want to say, death beam. It feels as if that's all you can call this. I know it's the arc canon, but yeah, it just seems like a death beam, which is not good for anything until we learn in Shadow the Hedgehog that, yeah, it's to blow up aliens. Yeah, I was disappointed too, I know. Yeah, it's a race against time to stop Eggman, essentially. It is high-octane action, there's a lot of explosions. It's pretty much what would happen if Michael Bay directed a Sonic game. Not wrote it, but just directed it.
Good God.
There's a lot of action in this game, but as muddled as that was, do you think that seems like inappropriate for now? An appropriate summarization?
I honestly think that it makes me sad that you're able to deliver such a concise summary. After like about a year and a half of me trying, I still can't summarize anything properly.
Well, I've missed a ton out, like Sonic ambushing the president once again. God, we'll get to that, but of course, as we established, you went into Sonic Adventure first of all, and that was kind of your first exposure to 3D Sonic. How did this game hold up in comparison?
So this really felt like a refinement of Adventure 1's gameplay. It felt a lot tighter and a lot more kind of responsive in many ways, and I say better design, but that's probably unfair to say, because I think Sonic Adventure 1 is well designed. I think it just feels much more refined, basically. I think it was interesting coming back to this kind of style of gameplay after having played some of the more modern Sonic entries, because I think there's a lot to really like about this game. I think there's some excellent levels in this one. City Escape is obviously great, but I really enjoyed levels like Metal Harbor, after the kind of when you're escaping the prison. I thought that was excellent. The jungle, I can't remember what it's called now, but the one in the jungle where you play a Sonic.
White Jungle,
I think it is, I think that's the one. I thought that those two were excellent. They're back to back, and I thought they were so much fun to play, and I had such a blast. Maybe I'm wrong in saying this. It felt like Sonic's levels were a lot more linear in this one than they'd kind of previously been. Am I right in saying?
It does feel like that. It feels as if for Sonic Adventure, it did, as I said, it rewarded you for exploring, so you could take like numerous paths. So I'm kind of so used to going my own set way of taking shortcuts, but I can see like other people who play it for the first time and they just take like the predetermined paths and everything. There's so many choices, and technically you can do that for some of the Sonic levels here, but you're right, it does seem a lot more linear, even with one thing I forgot to mention is both of these games have stellar introductory levels, you know, with Sonic having Emerald Coast and Sonic Adventure, and of course City Escape, which was one of your favourite levels.
Oh yeah, City Escape is great. I'm kind of annoyed at myself that I played Generations before having played this, because it obviously kind of spoiled a bit of City Escape. I think I would have liked City Escape much more if I'd gone straight to Sonic Adventure 2 rather than kind of having it like spoiled for me. I think one thing I noticed was that I do feel that the modern Sonic game, and this is just a consequence of these games having been developed later, you know, with the experience. I think they are kind of better to play some of the more modern Sonic games as opposed to, you know, the Adventure series. But I think if you kind of stick with the adventure series, you kind of get into it pretty quickly and you understand how it controls. And I didn't really find that many frustrations. I kind of found the last two stages of Sonic's campaign to be a bit frustrating, but really that was really kind of outlier. I didn't really have many other frustrations leading up to that point. I just thought it played really well, and I thought you could really tell this was a kind of focus on that kind of cinematic gameplay, and it really worked. There's some excellent kind of set pieces, obviously from like escaping from the truck in City Escape, some of the bits in Metal Harbor where like your planes are like flying and you have to run up the rocket and everything was really excellent. I think gameplay wise, Adventure 2 really felt like a step up from Adventure 1, and I felt that way as well with the story. I won't you did a great summation of the story, but I felt like the story was a lot better in Adventure 2 because I felt it was told much better, and I really liked a lot of the kind of plot points in it and everything, and it was good to follow, and I felt it worked well with the kind of interlocking characters this time, in that you kind of got a little bit of suspense. There's one bit where you meet Shadow about I think in the jungle level, Sonic meets Shadow, and Shadow talks about how the island's going to blow up in 15 minutes, which leads to an exciting escape. But you're like, oh, why is that? When does that happen? I can't wait to find out how that's going to happen. And then you get to the dark storyline, you get to play that level, and you understand why the island's going to blow up and everything. So I thought that worked really well, and it was a much better way to have these kind of separate characters and their separate stories, but have them kind of mesh together and overlap. So I just felt it felt like in many ways it felt like they kind of narrowed the scope and kind of reined in the kind of ideas and concepts, while with Adventure 1 it felt like they were trying to do a lot of different things. It felt like this one was a much more narrowing down. So maybe in a way it's not as maybe as imaginative and perhaps not as ambitious, but I think for what it was such an excellent refinement of everything that I really enjoyed Adventure 2.
I would totally agree with you there. It definitely feels more like a linear game, which I'm with you. I don't know how to feel about the fact that in Sonic Adventure 1 you have this very vast, adventurous hub world and everything. You've got, as I said, the city, you've got the jungles, the metallic egg carrier, Angel Island, of course, which is a lot tinier than you'd be led to believe. You've got all of these kind of aspects of the world, and then in this one, it's kind of like, oh, you're going from level A to level B to level B to level C. From what I remember, I think the original game was only supposed to have Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman as playable characters, and then people kicked up a big stink about not having Tails in, so eventually they had to kind of rework the gameplay. So in Sonic Adventure, you had 6 gameplay modes. You had your speed for Sonic, you had your racing for Tails, your treasure hunting for Knuckles, Amy Head, Big was just there fishing, and you had your shooting for E102 Gamma. For this, it splits it up into 3 core game styles. You've got your speed for Sonic and Shadow, you've got your shooting for Tails and Eggman, which I know you loved, Adam, and for your treasure hunting, you had Knuckles and Rouge. And I've got to ask you, because I know you said you loved Knuckles in Adventure, but did you think he compared any better in Adventure 2?
I didn't like Knuckles' gameplay as much in Adventure 2. I'll admit, I'm kind of the same route. I wasn't as big a fan of the treasure hunting in this one. It was nice though. What I did like is that they actually designed stages for these different gameplay styles, while with Adventure 1 they kind of try to force these other characters into Sonic stages with varying. Some of them I think work, but others just really don't work that well for the other characters. Well, at least with here, all these levels have been specifically designed for each of the characters and each of their different gameplay. In many ways, I think the treasure hunting gameplay is probably better in Adventure 2. They've kind of nerfed the radar a bit. So basically in Adventure 1, you need to find, in Knuckles level, you're basically tasked with finding 3 shards of the Master Emerald. You have this radar along the bottom, and basically it tracks each shard. It tracks all the shards at the same time. While with Adventure 2, it only tracks one shard at a time. You can still find the other 2, but the radar is not going to go off, until you found the preceding shard, which does kind of add to the gameplay, makes it more challenging, and means that you kind of have to learn the level a bit, and you're going to have to probably backtrack and crisscross the level several times to find all the shards. But I don't know. I think there was just something about. I think it was just because I kind of struggled a bit with Tails and Sonic in Adventure 1. and I just found Knuckles so smooth, just like glide around and climb everything. I just really enjoyed that. So perhaps because especially because I found Sonic a lot more easier to play Adventure 2, perhaps I didn't quite have that, I didn't have the kind of Knuckles bump of being like, oh, I can control this now, this is excellent. But I don't know, because again, like on the surface, I'm like, it's definitely better because they've designed it better in Adventure 2, but I don't know, I can't really put my finger on it. I just didn't have as much fun with it. So I don't quite know why that is, but it was just kind of my experience.
I definitely think Knuckles controlled a bit better. Like, I like the fact you can dive now, when you're gliding.
Yeah,
and you can just press B and you go down, and that really helps speed things up. But yeah, I really don't like the radar nerf in this game. I do agree. I don't understand how you're standing right beside an emerald and your radar's not going off. No wonder it keeps losing the Master Emerald. It seems as if, he's not suited for the job. Hashtag cancel Knuckles. Anyway, my beliefs aside, would you say narratively this game does a better job as well? Because you said gameplay wise, it kind of refines like Sonic's gameplay. I'm assuming when you say refined, it refines Gamma's gameplay as well for Tails and Eggman.
Do you know, weirdly for Eggman, definitely. Like I didn't really have many problems with Eggman, but weirdly, I don't know, I had a lot of issues with Tails, and especially Tails' hover mechanic. And I don't know why there was one particular level, oh my god, I forgot the name of it now, but it's at the pyramid, where you need to like basically bust into the pyramid with Tails. And I had so much, that was the hardest level in the game for me. I had so much trouble with Tails', I think that's where you get Tails' hover mechanic. And I just found the thing was so unpredictable. It would work at points, but then it wouldn't work. And sometimes you would clip into something and it would cancel the hover, and then you're like absolutely screwed. You'd fall into the quicksand and die. But I didn't have that issue with Eggman, so I don't know whether I was just really severely incompetent in that Tails level. And I just psyched myself out and I just couldn't do it. I was just fumbling all over the place. I think overall it was a refinement of Gamma's gameplay, but I don't know why I just had such issues with Tails. And I really can't explain why. Like, it must just be my incompetence.
I have to admit, I streamed this game like a couple of weeks. In fact, probably it was last month. And I gotta say, like, I feel as if I had similar problems with Tails, and I don't know what it was, if it was my controller, if it was just the way the game's optimized on the PC. I totally agree, because I was having trouble with the hover mechanic where sometimes it would cut out. Again, not all experiences are going to be the same there, but yeah, it just seemed weird. The one I have to admit I hated the most was the treasure hunting stages, because as I said, not only did they nerf the treasure hunting mechanic, as it were, where you had the radar which only pinged for one object, you also had Rouge's levels. And I know that the dark story is supposed to be a lot harder. I did not like Rouge's stages at all in this game. I hated the fact that Eggman said you had 15 minutes and she said 5 minutes should be plenty. And it's like, well, why are we here, Rouge? Just to suffer? Why are we here if you're just not going to listen to Eggman? Mad Space as well, and Meteor Hair, both of them, hate them. Really hate those levels. I do not appreciate them whatsoever. That's my rant. Those two. Those were the main kind of ones. Aquatic Mine, hated Aquatic Mine up until I got the breathing apparatus, because I remember I went through the whole game when I first played it and I forgot to get it, or sorry, I didn't even realise that was like a power up you could get, so I had to go all the way back to Aquatic Mine, get the power up for breathing underwater, and then it helped me in the last level. Do you know how hard that last level is, by the way?
I cannot imagine doing that last level without that at all. I don't know how you do it.
Oh, I didn't. Like, I kept trying, and I thought, okay, this is ridiculous. There must be something that can help. So, I went up on the old dial-up internet and I was like, what do you know?
How about that?
How about that? But, yeah, that was an absolute nightmare. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I prefer the story in this one to the first game. Like, where do you stand on this?
I definitely prefer Adventure 2's story. I just think it's more competently told. And there are really great elements to Adventure 1's story. I just think it suffers from the structure and how it unfolds. I think really kind of dampened my enthusiasm for the story, while with Adventure 2 it's much more logically told, and I just found it quite compelling, and I like the different characters, and I like that you've kind of got this redemptive arc with Shadow, and it felt more natural in the end as well, while the characters were teaming up, while I don't know, it felt a little forced in the end for Sonic Adventure, why everybody decides to show up right at the end there. I kind of felt like it made much more sense why everybody was kind of coming together in Adventure 2 to stop the the space colony arc from spoilers here, from crashing into Earth. I don't know, I kind of liked it more. I think it's just because it was more logically told to me. I was just able to follow it a lot easier.
What I will say in defence of Sonic Adventure 1 is it does feel more like a translation of the old games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
The whole concept of like Sonic Adventure, and I'm not saying like Sonic Adventure is better in that regard. I would definitely agree with you and say Sonic Adventure 2 has the better story. And I think the reason behind that is the fact that it stands on its own as a story, whereas Adventure 1, although the adventure is there and you know the environments are there and everything, is very much a Dr. Eggman has an evil plot. Let's stop him. And that's the whole game. It's Sonic stopping Eggman. And I know you could say that for 90% of Sonic games, but with Sonic Adventure 2, there's definitely a lot more going on. You know, you've got the mystery of this new character, Shadow the Hedgehog. Who is he? And why does his audio keep clipping above the other characters? We might never know. Hashtag, I will make you eat those words. Okay, one thing I will say, let's get the elephant out of the room. I hate the audio mixing for this. I feel as if where they under-edited for Sonic Adventure, they nearly over-edited for Sonic Adventure 2, where you've got characters that you basically can't hear them because the backing music is too loud. The audio just clips over other characters and they're interrupting other people. It's bad, isn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely, you can definitely, I do agree, it does feel like the pendulum swung too much the other way with Adventure 2, so they definitely were still trying to find their feet in that regard.
That's the major criticism I would levy against this game, other than Security Hall and Mad Space. Yeah, I would say that narratively this holds up better because it is its own story and it has a lot more going on than... Because the central core of it is Eggman trying to take over the world, but it's not just all about Eggman, if that makes sense. You know, you've got Shadow being a very key player in all of this, telling Eggman about the space colony arc and having his own motivations, and we get the horrific flashbacks to him witnessing his friend Maria getting shot. And I've got to ask you, Adam, because obviously you played Shadow the Hedgehog first. You've heard me go on about, oh, look at how silly it is that Maria gets like shot and everything. How do you feel about Shadow's characterization in this game in comparison to, like, you know, Shadow the Hedgehog and beyond?
Well, I think his characterization here was a lot better. I think it's a lot better in Adventure 2 than it was in the Shadow the Hedgehog game. Just because the Shadow the Hedgehog game is so muddled and there's so much like, is he an android? Is he real? You know, there's all that kind of that faff to it. While at least with Adventure 2, it was quite interesting when this character just shows up and then you're like, oh, who is this? You know, and it's an interesting character, and then you learn more about the backstory and you kind of understand what his motivations are. But then you get a nice bit at the end where, you know, he kind of remembers and he realizes, you know, with the promise that he made, and then he again, major spoilers again here, but he sacrifices himself in the end, and he has a nice arc in this in a way that I did not again. I didn't finish Shadow the Hedgehog, but I don't know. I didn't feel like I was going to get that kind of satisfying arc. And maybe the game does, but I didn't find that anyway. And I know people like him in 06. Again, I didn't play enough of 06 to kind of see his whole arc, so I can't really comment on that. But I just I liked the character in Adventure 2 because I felt like, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but I just felt he had a really nice narrative arc. I thought there was really interesting elements to his character, and I just thought he developed really well over the course of the game.
I feel as if nowadays, because of games like Shadow the Hedgehog, that, and ironically enough, even Sonic 06, I think, characterised them better than Shadow the Hedgehog in any iteration since, because for some reason, ever since Shadow the Hedgehog, everybody associates Shadow with being this gun-toting, oh, look at me, I'm riding the motorcycle, born to be bad kind of character. That's just not who Shadow is. And again, you know, Sonic the Hedgehog game, haha, don't take it seriously, but it's kind of criminal almost in gaming terms. But it's kind of criminal how they portray him in the later games, because in this game, he's got like quite a tragic backstory, and I feel as if in this game in particular, they walk the line, you know, between what's acceptable and what's straight up fan fiction-y age. Of course, with Maria getting shot, and, Gerald Robotnik literally trying to cause a genocide of humanity by crashing the space station. There's a lot of really dark elements in this game, even for a Sonic game. This is long before we have Sonic getting killed, before we have Shadow shooting guns. This is a story about a twisted hedgehog that has been locked up for about 50 years in isolation. The last memory he had was him getting shot into space while his best friend died in front of him and there was nothing they could do. There's some really hard-hitting things compared to, I mean, obviously there are moments like that in Adventure, but nothing is hard-hitting. And would you agree with that? Or am I just being too over-dramatic in this one?
No, there's some really kind of dark elements to Adventure 2, but in a way, to me, they felt more appropriate than in some of the other games which have tried kind of darker storytelling elements. The stuff that's in here, especially with kind of Gerald Robotnik's plan to take his revenge on humanity, it felt more fitting in this game than, for instance, something like Silver ruminating on whether it was morally right to take a life. Just something like that in Adventure 2 just felt more fitting. So it felt like storytelling on a kind of more epic scale than, certainly than the kind of old Genesis Sonic games. And it felt like that they carried that on from Adventure 1's attempt to have a kind of epic story. But I just thought it worked really well. There wasn't really a narrative misstep in this game that I can remember. While I feel like in some of the other ones, I think in basically most of the Sonic games, there's something where I'm like, oh, that didn't work, or I'm like, well, that feels very out of place. I don't know, everything just seemed to kind of work in Adventure 2, and there's nothing I can really point my finger at and be like, oh, that sticks out.
Other than the fact they blew up a whole island filled with people.
Well, Station Square got obliterated and nobody seemed to care about it, so what's one island in the grand scheme of things?
It's okay though, everyone was evacuated. Wait, no, sorry. I got my notes mixed up with Shadow the Hedgehog. Oh boy. They didn't evacuate, did they? See, this is the thing, and I'm going to get this out of the way before we continue with more of this, because it's something that I moan to you a lot about, Adam. That, of course, being our running joke of talking about how the president in Shadow the Hedgehog tried to absolve Professor Gerald Robotnik as being this somehow Nobel Prize winning peace giver and everything, and at the end he has the infamous line of saying, "Let us honour Professor Gerald Robotnik. Let us ensure peace and prosperity rules," and all of this utter rubbish. Because, and I tell you why, because in this game we get to see firsthand this poor man who loses his whole life's work, who is trying to rescue his granddaughter from, well, it's established in the comics and the kind of expanded lore. They don't really say what's wrong with Maria, but I think it's he's trying to cure a disease that she's got. Not going to go into that too in depth, but long story short, the gun soldiers storm the base and they think the first thing they should do is shoot a child in the face, lock him up, and execute him live on camera. And of course, he has this very, very grim speech where he's saying how, humanity took everything away from him. It is quite sinister for a Sonic game. This isn't your granddad's Sonic. This is really hard-hitting stuff. Then in Shadow the Hedgehog, they retcon it where Gerald Robotnik's like, oh, by the way, the cannon wasn't to blow up humanity, it was to blow up aliens. I'm done. This is a crock of rubbish. This is utter ridiculous.
It just shows that anybody can get a presidential pardon.
Exactly.
No matter what you do.
I honestly, this is my conspiracy theory of the night. I am convinced he's just doing this to win more votes.
What from the mad scientist community?
I have no idea, because first of all he's like, oh my god, Sonic the Hedgehog is in my van, or limo, what's he doing? And then it's like he's got a photo of Shadow and Sonic on the table, which makes me think he's got a pro Hedgehog policy, but only for Shadow and Sonic the Hedgehog. And then in Shadow the Hedgehog he's like, let us honour Dr. Gerald Robotnik, because that was probably beamed, that video was beamed to the entire world. So he's thinking, okay, my presidential polls have been going down since the alien attack. Let's give him a presidential pardon. That'll get my votes up. So you're welcome, Sega. You're wondering, how can we write this into the lore? I've just given you a reason, okay? Right, back to the episode.
Does that now, wait, before we go back to the episode, does that now mean that if we were to go to the president's desk now, there's a picture of of Gerald Robotnik outside the White House?
Yeah, and there's just a sticker over Maria's face.
With the president just put his face on top. I can't believe I got to meet my hero, Gerald Robotnik.
Let us pay homage to this tall, incredible man.
I love Gerald Robotnik.
Oh, Gerald Robotnik is such an underrated character. Obviously, he's dead, which is something you don't say a lot about Sonic characters, but yeah, he's just such an underrated, like, villain. Because, you know,
Game.
yeah, it's like, it'd be a very short game, Adam.
That's true.
But that's the thing, though. Like, Gerald Robotnik is referred to throughout the entire game. They always say, "Oh, Gerald Robotnik, he built this massive space station. He created Shadow the Hedgehog and everything." But we don't quite know anything about Gerald Robotnik until the very end, where he's like, "I had a bit of a whoopsie with the government. Anyway, here's a space lizard. Bye." And that's it. He decides to crash course the entire space station towards the Earth, where we get a weird montage of these, like, I have to admit, it's quite a weird but interesting choice, where it's like all these humans all over the world. So you've got ones in Egypt, you've got ones in France. Yeah, just all over the world being like, "Oh no, how terrible." It's interesting, but it's just such like an oh shit moment at the very end. Because I remember the first time I played it, I think I played through the hero story, and you're all like, "Yay, I played as Sonic, I win." But what you don't realise is if you play the dark story, Dr. Eggman actually gets the last Chaos Emerald, throws it into the machine, he's going, "Ha ha, yosh," and all of that. And then all of a sudden he turns round and there's a big danger sign flashing on the screen, or warning. It depends on whether you're watching the credits. That's a fun fact, by the way. It's different in the credits compared to the cutscene. I think it says warning in the cutscene and danger in the credits. Fun fact of the night. Totally useless information, but...
Checker wasn't doing their job.
And then, of course, that leads us into quite possibly one of the most stressful moments, where you have to play as all characters. You have to gather up all the knowledge that you've accumulated throughout the game. Yeah, once you get by that, you have to fight quite possibly one of the... And I'm not saying it's badly designed, but one of the worst enemies I've ever faced in my life. One of the worst bosses ever. That, of course, being the Bio Lizard. And before I go on my rant, is there anything you want to say about the Bio Lizard?
Yeah, so I speak about that final stage beforehand. I love the idea of the final. I love the fact that it is all these characters working together, you know, to kind of open the path for Sonic. Basically, I really like that idea. I found some of it frustrating. Like, I found some of the stages quite difficult, and then when the fact that when you die, you're like, oh, you're out of life. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to play this all again. You know, I'm gonna have to see all these characters again. So it added a good amount of tension. I remember I was playing this. So it's basically divided into 6 parts. The kind of final level, and the last bit, Sonic. I remember being down there, I had like I was on my last life. So I was like, right, I've got to get through Sonic stages because I can't go and play. I can't play the other 5 again. I can't do it. But it added a really good level of tension to it. So I think that was a lot of fun. Yeah, the Bio-Lizard it's very similar to another boss fight earlier. It's a lot harder, but it's similar. There's one where you fight a ghost, which, can I just say, has the worst voice I've ever heard in a video game. King, is it Boom Boo or something? Or
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so you fight him with Knuckles, and he just has a voice that's like, blah, blah, and it's terrible. I'm sorry. The fight's okay, but the voice just grated on me so quickly.
Yeah, but what's worse, though, is the ghost worse, or Knuckles' delivery where he goes, "What? A ghost?"
That makes me laugh, at least. The King Boom, I was like, no, I don't even laugh. This isn't even funny in that juvenile kind of way, you know.
King Boom Boo, you were a ghost the entire time. Okay, carry on, sorry.
How dare you? I'd disconnect you from this if I had the power to. For that cheek. But yeah, so the Bio-Lizard is kind of a bit like that. It's a lot harder, as you say, and it is awkward. There are some awkward stages to it. Like, especially there's one bit towards the end where basically the Bio-Lizard kind of like creates all these kind of, are they like balls of energy? I don't really know what they are, but basically, like, you need to kind of direct. You're playing a Shadow in this fight. You need to kind of direct Shadow from like each kind of ball of energy to the next to try and get him towards the Bio-Lizard's weak spot, and that's a bit awkward and can be quite fiddly. So I can see why I don't think it's like one of the best boss fights ever. Honestly, I probably preferred it to the Perfect Chaos fight, to be honest. I found the Perfect Chaos fight to be kind of more aggravating mechanically, but I can see why you have frustrations with the Bio-Lizards, and especially when you're younger and stuff, like that would be a really difficult fight.
I have to admit, it wasn't until I was a lot older that I actually completed the Bio-Lizard. So this is my confession of the night, but genuinely, when I was younger, I completed it all the way up to the Bio-Lizard, kept playing the Bio-Lizard. I could not do it whatsoever. So I kept going back to it. Years and years passed, and I grew older and the game was still there. I left it for a while. And I remember coming back to it because I think during that time I was kind of going through a difference of gaming taste. At that time I was like, oh, I want to try more shooters, I want to try this and that. And then of course I came back to the Bio-Lizard. I thought, oh, I haven't completed it. Let's go for it. So I decided to try it, and luckily, you honestly have no idea how sweaty my hands hands were after completing that. It was just this kind of relief where I slumped over. I was like, I can't believe I've done that. I just can't believe I've won. Finally.
Must have been a great feeling.
Oh, it was. It's one of the best gaming feelings I think I've ever had in my life. I was just like, thank God. And then, of course, you had to fight the final hazard, which is when the bio-lizard sticks itself up the nose of the space colony and drags it to Earth, which, cool in concept, but very weird to explain to people over a dinner party. You know,
I want to get to that dinner party. Sounds awesome. With you trying to explain the final hazard.
It's like me with all these napkins surrounding it, and it's like, now you see, the nose is very pointy, much like Gerald Robotnik. Now you see, the lizard goes in here. You know, I've got, in one hand I've got a potato, the other I've got just a fork.
And then I end the night by proposing a toast where I go, let us honour Gerald Robotnik. It's never going to get old. I love it.
Oh, I love that running joke. I honestly, it will never get old. Much like Maria and Gerald Robotnik.
Oh, wow.
Like, gunshot first, okay? I'm mopping up. I am their PR guy at this point.
Gunshot first. Put that on a t-shirt.
Hashtag the president did nothing wrong. Gun is not an affiliated government organisation. Actually, I don't know how true that is, because someone will dig up the Sonic lore and be like, actually, they were a militia. See if that is the case.
Militia? What are we into now? Forming the White House now being like, stop the count. This is what we're getting into.
Mr. President, get down. And instead of grabbing the photo of his wife, he just gets the photo of Shadow and Sonic.
He grabs his photo of Gerald Robotnik that he's pasted his face on.
I have to honour Professor Robotnik. Let us honour him in the bunker.
Oh my god, I love the Sonic universe. The fact that we can make a joke about this, the gunstorm in the White House, is why I love the Sonic universe.
The fact it's probably fitting with the universe as well. I mean, they blow up the White House, or sorry, the not White House, in Central City, which, I'm going to be honest, that's like a dick move, calling yourself Central City.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Station Square, I mean, it's literally, well, probably a square. You know, you don't see much of it, but...
It has a station, in fairness.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, calling yourself Central City, you know, all I'm saying is, maybe the Black Arms didn't do anything wrong. No, I'm not kidding.
Let's honour the Black Arms along with
Anyway, I better move on before I get us into trouble.
Before a gun come to your house.
Let us pay homage to God. Jokes aside, and I mean, when I say jokes, I mean like Shadow the Hedgehog, the game aside, I honestly love Shadow's character. This is a game that by far caused me to fall in love with Shadow's character. I honestly thought they did such a fantastic job, even though you'll play it for the first time, and I feel as if people's like idea of Shadow is so sullied by the games afterwards, that they'll go, oh, he's being edgy, your friend Maria got shot, oh. But it's quite, and again, going back to the thing in narrative, it's just so narratively well done. Because for a game called Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic isn't as... I mean, he is prevalent, but he's not as much a focus of the story. It seems as if Shadow takes pretty much, you know, he steals the show.
Yeah, Sonic is definitely not the central character of this game, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah.
To be honest. And you're right, you're totally right in saying that I think discourse on Shadow has been so coloured, especially by his own game. Unfortunately, has really kind of damaged his reputation. But he was actually taking Adventure 2 in isolation. He was such a good addition, I think, to this universe, especially with Sega going down a more kind of, you know, a darker route, a more epic kind of route for the series. He was an excellent addition, and I think he was done really well in this game. You know, it's not totally perfect, but they get far more right than they get wrong in Adventure 2. So I think he was a really excellent addition.
Going back to the word of the episode, narrative, honestly, I feel as if he has the best character development in this game.
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, Rouge, not much character development. She realises, oh, maybe there's more to life than stealing gems. Proceed to the next games where she does nothing but steal gems, and you're like, oh, okay. Knuckles stays the same, Tails stays the same. Eggman nearly shoots Amy in the head, but again, stays the same. I mean, he threatened to make an 8-year-old fox boy mincemeat. Like, this guy is unhinged and insane. I love it. He's just so crazy. And of course he tries to blow up Sonic and fails because of a Deus Ex Machina, which you've got the... I mean, it's the chaos. It's the Chaos Emerald, where we get introduced to the concept of Chaos Control, which I don't know how Chaos Control works, if I'm honest, because sometimes they portray it as being like slowing down time, and others it's just straight up teleportation. So it's like, what is it?
I think Deus Ex Machina is the perfect way to describe control. Whatever you need me to be, I can be it.
I didn't ask for this. But there are moments like that where you're kind of like, come on. Again, Sonic game, you can suspend your disbelief. Of course, after you beat the Bio-Lizard, you end up coming to the finale where it just accumulates to the final showdown between you and the Bio-Lizard, who's hurtling towards Earth, as quite possibly one of the best songs in Sonic history plays, that of course being Crush 40's Live and Learn. Now, before I go on, and you and I were having a conversation about what song was better, Live and Learn versus Sonic Adventure's Open Your Heart. And I actually put a poll up on Twitter today. Did I tell you?
I didn't know. Oh my goodness. I'm excited now. What one?
Open Your Heart by a landslide. No, I'm only kidding. It was Live and Learn. No, of course it was Live and Learn. Yeah, Live and Learn was the one that won. And for good reason, because you were saying yourself there that you're not as big a fan of Open Your Heart.
Yeah, like again, I'm not here to. I'm not going to say it's a bad song because I don't have the right to say what's good and what's bad in musical terms. But I don't really vibe with Open Your Heart. But Live and Learn, I think, is excellent, and I've basically kind of become a bit obsessed with it since finishing Sonic Adventure 2. I think I've listened to it at least once every day since I finished the game. It's just such a jam. I love it.
Yeah, I will agree. I feel as if Open Your Heart and this is me kind of reading too deep into it, but Open Your Heart seems a lot more kind of slow and it builds up to the chorus, because I do love the chorus of Open Your Heart, like the "Can't hold on much longer," and it goes on and on and on, and I won't sing the rest of that, don't you worry, Adam. It kind of builds up, a bit like Chaos throughout the game. It's like this slow trickle turning into a puddle, turning into a lake, turning into a flood, and it just like builds up into that. But I do agree, it's kind of hard to get into, and I feel as if Sonic Adventure does a disservice at the final act, where you're fighting Perfect Chaos, and oh god, you're fighting him in the first half of it, it does play, but then for some reason for the second half of the fight they have this kind of generic battle music.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's like this monster music. I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. But that's what they decided to do. So it's like, Live and Learn. Ba-da-bunch. Whereas Live and Learn, right out of the bat, it's thematically amazing. It is just such a bop, as you said. And it is this idea of living and learning. And I'm going to be cheesy here, Adam, so I apologise in advance. But not only is it an amazing bop, but I feel as if Live and Learn is kind of the quintessential theme for Shadow. Because throughout the game, he is under the impression that Gerald wants him to kill all of humanity, take out his revenge on people. By the end of it, he's reminded by, Amy, of all people, that Maria would have wanted him to, save people. And I have to admit, it's kind of like a last minute, oh shit, what have I done? And he has to run off and be like, oh no. But that's the thing though, he goes from, like this kind of solitary character who uses other people for his own gain, and then all of a sudden he builds up this kind of trust. So by the end of it, as you said, he risks his own life and he ends up dying, quote unquote, because of it. And I don't know how much more impactful this ending would have been if they just killed off Shadow, because the reason they brought him back was simply because he was popular. I don't know how well this ending would have been received, though, if he hadn't been brought back.
That's a fair point. Yeah, again, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. It certainly would have been a very impactful ending if that had been it. That this was Shadow's only appearance. But then again, I guess because you're such an interesting character, you kind of do want to see more of him. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? I don't know what to say.
Because he's such a popular character, it's oversaturated with, oh look, Shadow the Hedgehog, he's got a Glock, da-da-da. And you're like, great. But Shadow never used to be like that. There was so much more to his character. And again, I use this phrase a lot, it's not exactly the Citizen Kane of gaming, but at the end of the day, it's not as bad as people say. That's what I'll say, because I know a lot of people go back to play Sonic Adventure, they'll go back to play Sonic Adventure 2, they'll take all these kind of preconceptions in, saying, oh, it's a glitchy game, oh, it's this and that. But at the end of the day, that's not what it was. And I know that sounds weird to say, to be like, oh, well, if it has bugs at the beginning and it carries to the future, then surely that means it's a broken game. But at the time, this was obviously revolutionary compared to, like if it came out nowadays, people would say, oh, it's buggy, no excuse. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm someone who grew up with these games and went through this adventure with Sonic, with Big the Cat, with E102 Gamma, and then going on to adventure, going through with Shadow, with Eggman, with Rouge and everything, and just like being swept off my feet, having like a moment of entering this world and being able to explore these new locations with these characters, being able to find out more about Shadow, more about these like MacGuffins that they pulled out their backsides literally. And at the end of the day, I think it's just so well done. And even though some bits might not hold up, I would still recommend this game to people. But before, we end the episode, I know you had a couple of questions for me.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because obviously, as you said, this is a series that is near and dear to you. So I thought I'd ask that. I thought I'd get the hard-hitting journalistic questions in here and give you a little grilling before the end. So I know you love both these games, but do you have a game that you prefer, or are they both equal in your eyes?
That's a hard one. I would probably say they're equal.
Interesting.
No, sorry, that wasn't the end of the... No, I would probably say they were equal, probably because I have a lot of memories playing through Sonic and Sonic Adventure. To me, Sonic's levels in Sonic Adventure feel a lot more like a translation. As I said, it feels more like a translation from the retro age into the 3D age, whereas Sonic Adventure 2 is its own story. It's got his big boy soap shoes on, it's got his tie, pulled up, and it's like, I'm ready to take on the world for my own, story. As I said, it's not just about stopping Eggman, it's about finding out who Shadow is, what his deal is, who's Rouge, why does she work for the government, why did the president hire a jewel thief bat? Was that part of the election campaign? You know what, I would be surprised.
Jewel thieving bats.
Like the DeviantArt community.
But your words, not mine.
Well, this was the last episode. It's been fun. But honestly, I think both games have their merits. If I had to choose between one of them, I mean, maybe Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Adventure is that game I've played so many times that I could play it sleeping. Whereas Sonic Adventure 2, there are some bits that still annoy me. Like, as I said, Mad Space, Security Hall, those kind of ones. But yeah, I would say they're both equal.
No, that's fair. Like, they both, as you say, they both definitely have their strong points. And because I guess as well, they kind of, I know they're two separate games, but they kind of do feel like a whole as well. So yeah, you can definitely, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. Do you think, because obviously you like these games more than, you're a fan of the Sonic series, but obviously you like these two games more than the others. I think I'm right in saying than others in the series. Is it a nostalgia thing, do you think? Or what is it about these two adventure games that makes you rate them higher than kind of any other games in the Sonic series?
I have to say, I feel as if a lot of it is nostalgia, first and foremost, because there's a lot of people who come in and they'll say, oh, Sonic Unleashed is my favourite game, and personally, I don't understand that, but that doesn't kind of invalidate their opinion, because that might have been the first Sonic game they grew up with. Same with Pokemon, like I hear people saying, oh, Diamond and Pearl, oh, I love the remakes because, well, kind of, loose paraphrasing there. But like, oh, I can't wait for the remakes because Diamond and Pearl was my very first Pokemon game. And I really, this another controversial point here while we're at it, I do not like Diamond and Pearl. I feel as if it's one of the worst of the series. But again, it's like, that's not the game I grew up with. I grew up with the janky Pokemon Yellow, which going back to it now, it's filled with bugs. It's filled with, mistakes. But at the end of the day, I still love it for all its flaws. And the same for the Sonic Adventure series. That was kind of the turning point that really hooked me onto the series. And I feel as if going back as an adult all these years later and kind of analysing them, I don't think they're perfect. I will agree. I don't think these are like, the best Sonic games ever, because I have to say, I had a lot of fun with Generations, and I've had a lot of fun with Mania and those kind of games. But at the same time, these kind of represent a time where Sonic was trying something new. They were trying something different. They were saying, okay, what kind of crazy story are we going to get Sonic into now? They were kind of testing the waters with more mature storylines without going full blown Shadow the Hedgehog. Hashtag pay homage to Gerald Robotnik. Never gets old, I told you. But I feel as if that's kind of the core thing. It hit that perfect balance of adventure and story for a Sonic game. And I feel as if people who go into it now and they don't give it a fair chance because, and again, I'm not gonna name names, but there's particular people who have either played this or they've made certain jokes about like the series. And you know what? Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, you can't make a joke about this. It's like sacred ground. You know, make jokes about the janky physics, make jokes about, you know, the weird animations. But if that's your mindset going into these games to be like, this is going to be a terrible game, I can't wait to exploit it and show people how terrible this game is, you're not going in to give it a fair chance, I feel. You're going in just to rip it apart for the sake of entertainment. And I feel as if that's like very disingenuous, even if it's a Sonic game, because let's face it, pick any Nintendo game like Legend of Zelda. I've said this before, but I never grew up with Ocarina of Time. I never grew up with Majora's Mask. But if someone turned around to you and said, oh, Ocarina of Time's bad, it didn't age well, and I went into Ocarina of Time and I played it on the channel and said, oh, this is terrible, look at the terrible graphics, look at this and that. You know, that's, at the end of the day, that's still someone's childhood game. And I don't think it deserves the criticism that it gets. Again, it's not perfect. It's not the gold standard of Sonic games. I feel as if the gameplay is improving from those days. Like, I wish they would take some elements from the adventure games to the modern ones. Like the spin dash and things, I thought they were perfect in those games. But yeah, that's my kind of 2 cents on the issue. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And you raise a lot of valid points there, and I'd agree with you. I think the gameplay has got better, mostly. Generally, I think the gameplay has got better.
Yeah.
Although, to be honest, I found Sonic Adventure 2 easier to play than I found something like 06 and Shadow. So I will say that. I think the gameplay was better there in Adventure 2 than
that's fair.
some of the preceding games. But yeah, no, I can see there was a lot. It would be nice to say it go back and take some of the elements from these two games. And that was the actual last question I was going to ask you. Do you want to see a third adventure game? Do you want to see Sonic go back to this kind of era, the kind of modern spin on it, or would you rather they just kind of left it in the past and just sort of left it with these two games?
It's a controversial one because on the one hand, they've informally tried to like usher in a Sonic Adventure 3, whether that be Sonic Heroes, which some people have informally been like, oh yeah, that's the closest we ever got to Sonic Adventure 3. Personally, I strongly disagree. I don't think Sonic Heroes holds a candle compared to Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 for many reasons, and I could like go on and on about that. But you know, you had Sonic 06, which was kind of teased as being like the new Sonic Adventure 3. I feel as if they did do a Sonic Adventure 3, they would need to watch themselves. They would really need to watch what they were doing with the franchise, if that makes sense. Again, it's no secret that the Sonic fan base is volatile at times, but I feel as if, especially for the Sonic Adventure series, they are kind of treasured games. You know, it's almost as if they brought out, in fact, no, they actually did. I was going to make a joke and say it's almost as if they brought out like a sequel to the original games, and they did. It was called Sonic 4, and it sucked. It wasn't good. Nah, I'm kidding. I played a bit of it. It wasn't my thing. You know, if you're a fan of it, because I have seen people who they said, oh, I like Sonic 4. I wish there was another part, so all power to you. Yeah, it's kind of the careful nature of it. You know, you have to make sure that if you're doing a Sonic Adventure game, commit to it. Make it a Sonic Adventure game. Don't just make it Sonic's Grand Slam Jam Feet Knuckles. I would like to see it, but just as long as they're careful with it.
Yeah, you have trepidation about if they were to try that. If they
Pretty
were
much,
to be a
yeah.
project. That's fair. You know, I think that's fair. And for a lot of people I know do really treasure. I see Adventure 2 listed as a lot of people's favourite Sonic game. So I understand there probably would be a lot of people very, very worried if Sega was to, you know, Sonic Team were to go and make an Adventure 3. Yeah, no, well, thank you for answering the questions. And it was just lovely. Can I just say, it was just lovely to hear you just, you know, speak about these games and how much they mean to you. It was really nice to hear that. So thank you for sharing.
And thank you for playing these games and giving them a fair shot, because I know they do have their problems, and a lot of it doesn't age as well as I remember it, rightfully so. But no, thank you for giving it a fair shot.
Well, no, it's my pleasure. And to be honest, like as I said, yes, I had some frustrations playing, both these games. But you know what? I look back at the whole experience. Like I had a lot of fun with these games. Like I left Sonic Adventure 1 and was like, I really enjoyed that. And I was actually sort of surprised how much I actually enjoyed it. And then the same with Adventure 2. Sure, I had my issues with playing as Tails and everything like that. But just thinking about Adventure 2 now, I'm just like, man, I really liked that game. That was a great game. I still think, looking back at my whole journey through Sonic, I still think I would probably put Generations as my favorite of the Sonic games, and I think that it's probably Adventure 2. I really liked Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as well, but I don't know. I think I'd be more inclined to go back and play Adventure 2, just because I think it's just such a well put together game, and I think I really like the gameplay on the whole, and I like the story, and yeah, I was just really impressed. And you know what? I really liked Adventure 1 as well. I really do. I really admire Adventure 1 for all its kind of faults and everything. I think it was a really ambitious game, and I kind of admire the fact that Sega and Sonic Team just went for it and said, you know what? Let's try all these different things. And they didn't all work, but they tried. And I think there's a lot more that works in that game than doesn't. So I really admire that game as well. So this really, I think, it was a height of the Sonic series, these two games, because I think they're both really good in their own separate ways, and I think well worth playing still to this day.
I mean, from the gameplay to the music, everything kind of just falls into place. As we said, it's not a perfect game, but all I can say is I am really glad that you enjoyed your experience with Sonic Month, because I'm not going to lie, I was a bit worried when you came to me and said, I want to do Sonic Month. And I was like, oh, sweet Jesus, that means you're going to...
put me in.
Oh, sweet Jesus, that means you're going to have to listen to Let Us Pay Homage. Which I was worried, I'm not going to lie. There was some trepidation there. But honestly, I'm just so happy that you enjoyed this. For anybody out there who you might be thinking, should I get into the Sonic games? Honestly, just go back and listen to our Modern Age, our Retro Age, and our Dark Age episodes to see what we think of it. As for the Adventure series, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. Would I say it's the perfect Sonic game? Probably not. I do agree with you, Adam. I do think that Generations, like in terms of gameplay, is probably one of the best, if not the best, Sonic game in terms of like gameplay. Maybe not in story, but that's a story for another day. Whether you love the Retro Age, whether you love the Dark Age, whether you love the Modern Age, we all just gotta live and learn. So without any further ado, Adam, thank you so much for doing this episode with me.
It's been so much fun. That just this episode, all the previous ones, this whole month, and all I'd say is pay homage to Gerald Robotnik and go try out a Sonic game.
And with that last homage being paid, as we said, this is the very last episode of Sonic Month. Thank you all so much for joining us on this journey. I feel as if by the time this is out, the second Sonic the Hedgehog movie will be out.
Oh my god, what good timing.
I know, exactly, isn't it? I can't wait for it, personally. Are you going to go see it, Adam?
I think I definitely will now. I'm far more inclined now, having become much more well versed with the series, and also it's got my boy Knuckles in it. I've got to make sure that he's been done right.
That's true. We're gonna see our main boy Knuckles in this, and of course Sonic and Tails, and God knows who else is going to be in there. Because I don't know. There have been rumors, but you never know. You never know with Sega.
Come on, Fang.
Come on,
or Gerald Robotnik. Come on.
Let us pay homage to Fang the Sniper. His shots continue to keep our country safe. Do you think Fang shot Maria?
Oh my god. I feel terrible saying I hope so, but... My god, I'm just imagining them having to go find Fang now. When people start like in war films where they have to go like travel to find the grizzled old veteran who's like living out in a cabin somewhere in the woods. Imagining Sonic and Tails having to go find Fang, who's just like chopping down trees and stuff. Retired.
I haven't heard that name in a good while. I don't know why he's voiced by, what's his name? You know the guy, the one with the mustache. The cowboy. Elliot something.
Oh, Elliot. I know who you mean. Sam Elliott. No,
Sam Elliott, that's the one. Thank you.
Let's say Sam Elliott.
It is, yeah. I'm going to Google that, and if not, this will be cut from the episode, but... Leaving you on that very controversial point to ponder as we roll into the next couple of episodes. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you want to hear more Sonic content, or really just any more of our general content, you can listen to the Chatsunami podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube under the name Chatsunami. So just look for the red panda under the name Chatsunami, and we'll catch you there. But until then, stay safe, stay awesome, stay hydrated, and most importantly, open your heart.